I don't want to raise dependent children. I want to raise independent children because my father's an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. A lot of my friends that I'm around, or a lot of the friends that I have, are entrepreneurs. And it's just it's a way of life, right? Like entrepreneurship is not, it's a choice, of course, but it's, I don't know, putting a little bit of pressure on oneself to have a greater gain in the end seems a little bit more, I guess, fun. Maybe it's my ADHD, a steady life.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Brotherhood Beyond Business podcast. Today we're talking with Cory Borman here of Swoon Learning, right? Swoon Learning. And we're going to talk about his personal life, kind of dig into why he got into this, where he came from to get into the Swoon Learning in the tutoring industry, and then also what the business does, learn really in depth what the business does. And we'll go from there and see what his legacy looks like, what he's trying to do with this business, where he's going in the future with him and his wife, what they're trying to do in this life. So let's go ahead and dive into Cory's life. Cory, go ahead and start off. Just kind of give us really the background on who you are and what brought you into like the adventure to get you to Swoon Learning, right?
Well, I'd say it mostly started with the fact that I have ADHD and I'm a neurodivergent person. So I have a different style of learning. I've always loved education. I've always loved learning. Having ADHD allows me to consume a massive amount of information, but it makes it very hard to distill that information. So up until about, I'd say my early 30s, I didn't know how to manage the challenges that ADHD brought to me. So I started a business with a friend of mine down in San Diego, and it's a behavioral, he's a behavioral therapist, and he works with the kids who are on the spectrum. Now, ADHD isn't actually on the spectrum. It's not considered to be part of the autism spectrum. It's kind of right outside of the spectrum. So it doesn't get a lot of the insurance benefits that autism does. But he had been a behavioral therapist for pretty much his whole life. And I saw that a lot of the kids that he worked with struggled to really manage themselves in their daily lives and in their professional life as well, because they really had challenges getting to the professional because of the neurodivergent struggles that they had. So what I wanted to do with him was work with him on building a business that built out an application that did a lot of the intake when they were doing the trials on location. And at that moment, I dove deep into behavioral psychology, and I really learned a lot about the challenges that I was having and how they were affecting me and what I needed to do to manage them. And that a light bulb really went off at that time. Prior to that, I'd been in education. I had been in hospitality. I had also worked in SaaS as well, in software. I worked for Pearson for 5 years, Pearson Education for 5 years prior to this business that I started with my friend. But like I said, the light bulb really went off when I understood what I needed to do in order to manage myself, because I talk about this a lot. We'll get into my company obviously a little bit later, but I talk about this fact where there's a gentleman that I follow. His name's Russell Barkley. I believe he's a psychologist, but his focus is on ADHD. And I've read a lot of his books, and there's one book that he wrote called Executive Functions that really hit home for me. And it talks about how ADHD has a propensity to be underdeveloped in certain executive functions. And the two top executive functions that ADHD people are underdeveloped in are emotional regulation and task initiation. And I've always had a problem with the emotional regulation component of life. And I never really understood why, because sometimes I would have meltdowns for no reason whatsoever. And I didn't understand why. And this really happened it still happens, obviously. I still have dysregulation and I have some meltdowns sometimes. But knowing what I know now by opening up that business with a friend of mine, he did applied behavioral analysis. So it's a method of running trials on students to or not necessarily students, but on kids who have autism. It's operant conditioning, right? It allows them to generalize certain things in their lives so that they can be more functional and more independent. I mean, that was really the whole point of the business, but you use a specific method called applied behavioral analysis. And it could be anywhere from not being able to flush a toilet or not being able to get up and comb your hair, brush your hair, or even like put on clothes, right? It's like real basic functions in life that a lot of these kids were struggling with. Luckily, that wasn't me. But I would still have occasional meltdowns. I would still have occasional dysregulation, and I wouldn't understand. And I just didn't understand why, because I really did want, and a lot of it did come down, it was centered around task initiation, which, like I said before, is like the second most underdeveloped executive function, where in my mind, I would say, wow, I really want to do this, but for some reason I can't. And I just could not figure out why it was. A lot of people attribute it to laziness, but it really isn't, maybe a little bit, but it really does come down to the emotional dysregulation. And so I worked with a lot of these kids as a product person, which is my background. If you don't get in it and you're not, as they say in the software industry, if you're not eating your own dog food, then you're not really embodying what's going on. So I became a behavioral interventionist at this company. So I'm founder, CMO, whatever the title was. I mean, there's really no titles in startups, right? That's more of like an external validation. But I was a behavioral interventionist, and I learned an unbelievable amount about how difficult life is for kids with autism. And then, it humbled me, right? It didn't make me feel so bad about my dysregulations, in the life that I have. So I took that knowledge, and I know that endemically, pandemically, it's a problem for a lot of people. And it's even a bigger problem for a lot of children. They might not be neurodivergent, but I mean, these ratios have slimmed down to 1 in 5 boys are, neurodivergent to some degree. 1 in 11 girls, I think that was the last statistic that I read, are neurodivergent or, have ADHD or ADD. So it used to be, 1 in 20, 1 in 50. I mean, there's multiple factors for that, right? Like, we won't get into that, but I took this knowledge that I learned, and I took these processes on how to regulate myself more in order for me to be able to initiate tasks and complete work. I took that knowledge and I incorporated it into a process. And that process that really, I like to say that Trello saved my life. I don't know if, your audience knows. I'm sure they probably know about task management tools, right? And Kanban tools. Trello is one specific one that I had used previously to building this business with my friend. And I actually used another tool called Monday to help him build his business, where I basically, something that I learned when I was at Innova Culinary was setting people up to be successful. I think it's like a Jim Collins concept or something like that. I don't remember exactly where it came from, but it's not just delegating work to people, but it's actually putting in some work and then handing it off, right? So like you kind of like build a process and then you hand that process off to somebody, or, you don't just tell people to like figure it out, right? You're a problem solver. So it's like a product management type of mentality where you put yourself into the position, you figure out the problems, and then you help other people figure those problems out as well. So the Kanban board was something that helped me get more organized. So another executive function under development is, compartmentally, it's organization. And with that is prioritization. I think a lot of people have difficulty with prioritization. I think there's a lot of organized people that don't know how to prioritize things. And, I'm definitely one of those too. I mean, it's hard to prioritize. You don't know you really don't know what takes precedence over something in a hierarchical like prioritization level. Like that stuff shifts, right? And being an entrepreneur, it never sticks. It's very fluid. one day you might have this priority, and there might be a fire that you have to put out, so it reprioritizes things. So it makes it very challenging if you don't have a level of organization to be able to prioritize. So I found that these Kanban boards, Trello specifically, I was using Monday for a while, but Trello specifically is a very open framework. It's very extensible, and you can kind of mold it in a way that fits your organization / prioritization style. My business partner, who I'd met at Innova, she was on the hardware side and I was on the software side. I remember the first time that we met was in the Innova office. And this, like I said, was prior to me starting the business with my friend before I moved down to San Diego. It was when I was living up in San Francisco. She saw me working on Trello. I had all my teams. I had my dev team. I had my design team. I had my UX team all on separate boards that kind of all connected. And so we ran all of our tasks through Trello. The whole company was literally built on Trello. I mean, this company was, before I came into it, it was at zero revenue. And by year 3, we were at about 65 to 70 million in ARR. And then we sold the business for $250 million to Electrolux. So this multi-million-dollar business was literally built on Trello. It was built on a Kanban board. I mean, amongst other integrations and stuff, it wasn't just Trello, but
there was a system behind this.
Yeah, exactly. There's systems that were connected to, but Trello is like kind of the task. It's the accountability tool. It's the task management tool, right? Like you take the whole idea is, it's behind this Angela Duckworth term called chunking, where you like take things from a very complex state and you break them down into like really manageable states. And there's like a mnemonic called INVEST for that, but we don't have to get into that. And that kind of helps you figure out, it's a very software thing, right? Like it helps you figure out how to take that complex component or that complex whole and break it down into small and manageable chunks that then build back up to that, right? So that's how you can build out a Trello board. And that's how I built out all of my Trello boards working at Innova. Well, Carla recognized that. And she said, well, what are you using? What is that? And I said, oh, it's Trello, and here I am just completely nerded out, in the machine or in my computer, just building out boards and tracking things and, just completely optimizing it and making it more efficient, making the systems more efficient, which, in turn makes my team more effective. And, I had a team overseas in Ukraine, so I had to manage them as well. It's very taxing, it's very exhausting, but to imagine doing that, not using a Trello board now is like, I use Trello for everything. So Carla at the time was doing tutoring, and me always loving education, or have always loved education. We didn't really talk much at that time, but a couple of years after Innova was acquired, Carla reached out to me and she said, hey, I'm looking she had worked at Apple. So she and her husband worked at Apple, and she worked with Steve Jobs, like literally with Steve Jobs. She worked on the first iPod. She worked on a lot of hardware products at Innova. She worked at Xbox. She worked at NASA. She's double E electrical engineering, and she's got a degree in physics as well. So she's super, super smart. And so she was tutoring kids while she was doing hardware. She was a hired contractor. So she'd come in and build products for companies and then go to another company and do the same thing. She did that after Apple. So she was tutoring via Zoom she's been doing it for about 10, 11 years now. But prior to us meeting, she was doing it for about 7, 8 years. And she started to take on this Kanban to keep herself organized. And she realized that it had a direct correlation to the success of the children, which is, measured by grades, graduation rates. Like, I think her number one success metric that mattered was how many graduations did she get invited to? That was something that she always teased about. But it's a really good metric, though, if you think about it, right? From an educator's perspective. because grades can only tell you so much, right? And you don't know that there's a bell curve with grades. There's a lot of external factors that go into how things get graded. But something that she was recognizing was that being organized in this Kanban board and running things across this Kanban board from a backlog to doing, or to in progress, or doing to done, right? Like it's pretty simple, like a Kanban board. It can be, or it can be really complex, like Jira. If you use Jira for software development, super, super complex. But now Jira, actually, Atlassian, who's the makers of Jira, they bought Trello. So now they've made Trello extremely complex. So I don't mind complexities, but a lot of people do. They have a very difficult time with complexities. And so,
especially for something like Trello, which is very simple. Which
Yeah.
is one of the best parts about Trello was how simple it was.
yeah, and going back to what I was saying about setting people up to be successful, I mean, the hardest thing to, if I'm going to practice what I preach, I can't give somebody something that's super complex, right? Because I have to break it down for them into small, manageable pieces. Well, what better way to do that than through a visual Kanban board than something like Trello? So Carla was using that with her tutoring, and it works really well for virtual. It works great for virtual. And so she had called me up. I had a digital marketing company before, after Innova, that I ran for about 5 years, and I loved it. It was great. But I think there was a period where I said, okay, I'm ready to do something. I'm ready to service myself, right? I love the clients that I had, but I was ready to build something that was my baby. And I did feel like that when I was at Innova, but I didn't have that total ownership, right? So this was something that Carla and I could build from the ground up based off of her analog, right? So I took her analog and we built out our program first, which is academic coaching. That kind of became one-on-one and group virtual. And we used those students and those coaches. We call them academic coaches because of the executive functioning that I had mentioned earlier. So not only do we deliver subject matter expertise, but we also work with them through a weekly planning subject where we help them organize, because our front office software has a very light version of Kanban board within it. So that makes up a key component of our software.
So when you're saying that, you're helping the students organize, right? Like the ones that you're tutoring in a sense, or coaching?
Yes. So if I were to put it in one tagline, is we help students become more accountable.
Okay.
Yeah. Not only in their work, but also in their life as well, because it transfers over, right? You always get people saying, mixing business and pleasure. Right? Well, it's kind of hard not to do that when you're an entrepreneur, right? Like, because your life isn't separated by, it's very incorporated, right? It's not separated by your business and your personal life. It's very personal, especially if you build a product. And
every single one of my best friends owns a business, and I do business with them.
Yeah.
Like, that's just like, once you're an entrepreneur, that's just part of how it is, right? It's just nothing wrong with that.
No, I mean, you obviously have to, and being a lover of behavioral psychology, not just because I love to read, but also because I need and want meaningful and successful relationships. You have to know how to balance your behavior at home and at work as well, right? Like, it's not ultimate stoicism, although stoicism can be helpful especially in business. Maybe not so much in the house, but I mean, I'm an extreme enthusiast of behavioral psychology. So, like, I've read pretty much all B.F. Skinner's books, and working with kids as well. There is a lot of behavioral components that they don't get from their teachers, nor do they really get from their parents. Like, parents don't really have time to think about behavioral psychology and work with their kids from a behavioral perspective. They like to farm it out, right, for the most part. Some do, but they're the outliers. So that pretty much brought me to Swoon. Carla was doing Swoon tutoring before. And then we decided that we were going to launch Swoon Learning, because I wanted to be a bit bigger than that, more than just tutoring. So I had to convince her that software was the model to scale, that humans and human capital and human costs is a very delicate subject. It's a very delicate, I guess, cog, like the cost of goods and services, right? It's very delicate, and it can be very expensive, especially in a startup stage. So as much as I do want to continue to hire academic coaches, because we do believe that at the core of education is still a human to human relationship. Because we have found a lot, and you can stop me and pivot if you want, to talk about something else, or if that
Sure, yeah.
if that cleared up.
You're good. You're
Something that we have discovered in so we've been around for about 3.5 years. So something, but Carla's been teaching for forever. She's got a kid, and the success model that I had mentioned earlier was how many graduations you go to. Well, she was able to get her daughter, who absolutely hated math, which generally is the case, right? Like your parents do something and you kind of shun them, well, maybe not shun them, but you choose not to go down that path, as more of like a revolt against your parents, right? So you choose to do something different. So Carla loves math, but her daughter hated math. And so she was able to get her daughter to love math and get into UCLA. And that becomes kind of a model for how, if you want to look, I'll be the first to say that if you don't want to go to college, don't go to college. I think college has its place in the world, but it's not for everybody. So if you're really good with working with your hands, the trades need really talented people, but if you want to work with your mind, or if you really want to work with AI, because that's pretty much like what it is nowadays, then, getting a college education and being socialized within that environment, and, going and having that discipline built up in college is really going to help you work with other people in the real world, right? Because it is a team. College is a team sport. So yeah, so I guess that pretty much like leads us up to where I am currently with Swoon. So our software is pretty mature right now. It can handle quite a bit of load. We have two different business verticals. We have one that still does the tutoring, but then we have an institutional vertical. So we have a couple of schools that we're working with, that our tool, front office, acts as a complementary tool. It's not a supplementary tool to their learning management systems or their security information systems, the LMS or SISs. They're not really meant to replace those, because those are, talk about complex. Those are super complex, and it's hard to compete against the incumbents in that space, like against like Google, even like Schoology, iReady Connect. Yes, even some schools use Microsoft. Yeah, Google Classroom is the one. So it's really hard to compete against them, because they've got like pricing dominance, right? They're bulk. So most Canvas is another one. Most schools use Schoology, Canvas, Google Classroom. Google Classroom makes up the bulk, and they're such low cost. They almost like, I think they even give it away for free at some point. So especially in the United States, I don't think they're as global. But then you have like open source tools like Moodle as well, where you can like basically build out your LMS platform. So like competing with that stuff, that wasn't really what we set out to do. What front office does is it's the accountability software. So it's the accountability integration, which a lot of these systems don't necessarily hold you accountable to things. They might offer the metrics in as far as grades, attendance, stuff like that to the teachers, but they don't track work very well. They're mostly just storage facilities. So you can store a lot of documents and whatnot, but then accessing those documents and having them be valuable to a student or to a teacher is quite lacking. Also, another thing that front office does that is quite different from some of these other legacy LMSs or SISs, maybe not so much the SISs, but the learning management systems for sure, is there's no human component that is ever present, or that's omnipresent, I should say. At the core of what Swoon Learning is, you can always book an academic coach. Not so much on the institutional vertical, but more on the academic coaching vertical. So what we've done is we've created this kind of handshake where it's like Uber for extended help, if you want to think about it that way, right? So supply and demand, there's in schools, in an institution, and we work primarily with private institutions. So in a private institution, you have students who realistically are hard to identify if they're having challenges, because there's layers and layers and layers of technology and humans and bureaucracy within these institutions. So it's hard to detect if a student is having, a challenge, not only behaviorally, psychologically, and or academically, right? So even like athletically too, right? So like a lot of the kids that we deal with in high school, or that we work with, I don't want to say deal with, but a lot of kids that we work with in high school have they're student athletes. Like 2/3 of our kids are student athletes. So they come to our academic coaching side of the business, the tutoring side of the business, and their parents look for extended help for them because they're having challenges in academics because they're excelling in athletics, right? So that balance is something that we recognized early on as well, that we service. So, but in the institution side, because there's a lot of, those layers that I mentioned, it's a lot of the times, the teachers, it's a 1-30, 1-50 ratio there, and they have multiple classes that they're actually running, in the school because of labor shortages and all kinds of different problems in school. Private's a little bit, a little bit more, I'd say, or I don't want to say organized, but private's a little bit more functional, than public. I think public's a little bit less functional because there's more layers of things and different expectations, of course, right? Funding, whatever. But in the private institution, it sometimes is difficult, and in the public, of course, it's difficult to identify when a child is struggling at the most opportune moment, right? You can tell if a kid's struggling because their grades are, precipitating, right? They're getting lower and lower and lower over time, or their recidivism, is that the right word? No, their truancy, right? Their truancy rates of not showing up to class are high. Yeah. So get rid of recidivism. That's institutional prisons. So it's truancy. Their truancy rates are plummeting as well. So there are ways to, there are indicators, right, that schools use, but they don't really pay attention to those indicators that much. It's usually at the last minute where it's a panic buy, right? Tutoring is a panic buy. And so what we want to do in the institution with our front office plugged into that is we want to be able to identify when those kids we want to get them on the on-ramp, right? We don't want to get them on the off-ramp when there's emotional need. We want foundational functional need. So we want to be able to identify when a child is beginning to struggle so that we can intervene. And a lot of this I learned from working it was Communication Lab was the name of the company that I started with my friend, the applied behavioral analysis. It was all about intervention. It was all about how quick to intervene can you be, right? So it was a very like behaviorally it was a very behavioral or very psychologically driven intervention. And so we think that a lot of the students that are dysregulating in the school, whether they're neurodivergent or neurotypical, has a lot to do with the anxiety of not catching things early on, right? Like this isn't new, that what I'm talking about, right? Like predictive analysis isn't new, right? So we have this opportunity with front office that we're currently working with schools in order to give them more human language-based insight into if a kid is at a beginning stages of a downfall or depreciation, right? Level. Catch them before, and then integrate and kick them over to front office, Swoon front office, right? Which is our tutoring version of the system, and allow them to get extended help. So that's kind of where that Uber for tutoring, or Uber for can't remember what I actually said before. Uber for extended help. That's kind of where that comes in, because we can be that handshake between where we have vetted academic coaches that already work for us and work with a lot of kids actually that do go to these schools that we're working with, but where it's almost a seamless acquisition of a vetted academic coach.
I mean, so I'm just going to give my perspective, because those of you guys that don't know, my wife is a teacher. And so this is the conversation that you're telling me, honestly, is her biggest obstacles, right? What you guys are trying to solve are their biggest obstacles, because
their classrooms are pretty full. So she's in a public school system, which is a little like public school systems are pretty full. I don't know private world that much, but I know public schools for sure are pretty full of kids. I mean, their classrooms are like she kind of has like a 1 to 27 ratio right now, which is a pretty big ratio. This is my understanding. I'm literally just repeating what she's saying. I don't know anything about schooling much, but well, her biggest thing is like they have to be very reactive to a lot of the issues happening, right? And so they're being reactive to when these kids have already fallen off. They pretty much just get suspended for all of some of these things that they're going into versus like having a stage to go to. Tutoring is not really something that's even offered to the kids, right?
Mm.
It's more just like, it's usually comes down to they're saying it's a behavioral issue when really, as my wife says, I don't think it truly is a behavioral issue, but it's showing up as a behavioral issue because the teachers, the principals, like even their school specifically has downsized to the point that they don't even have like all the things. They go from principal to not even having an assistant principal now. And so there's just like these stages that schools are losing because of, overall things. But I do think some of the things you're talking about sound like they're problem solver for like, let's catch the kid really when they're on the downswing, put them into something to bring them back on the upswing. But what happens in schools right now, that pressure is actually put on the teacher to like they're seeing a downswing, which then is going to affect the numbers of all the kids in the school, which then is going to affect the finances from the state that come into them. So they can go from like a B-rated school to a D-rated school or vice versa. Like you're doing well, you can go from a D to a B-rated school, which affects finances. At least in Arizona, I don't know all the other states if they follow that exact scale or not, but here it does. So like their Chino Valley middle school was a D-rated school, but the high school is a B-rated school. That affects the kind of finances coming in. And so, but one of their biggest things is because of the kids' academic fall off, that pressure's put on the teacher to like, you need to do better in the classroom. But it's not a classroom issue. It's actually just kids falling off. And so you guys are solving, okay, front office is catching, hey, we know this is about to happen. Let's then intervene before this happens. And nobody is of the wiser in many ways, meaning like, hey, the kid's not going to have issues. They're going to be back on track, but it's also not going to affect the school who's going to be losing money because specifically in the public sector is going to be losing money because if we have enough kids going into this, we might go down in ratings because of our test scores, which will then negatively impact the money that's coming in.
Yeah, I'm glad you validate that because, that's really what we're seeing a lot and what I read as well. When I read a lot about education naturally, I've read a lot about education for a really long time, but I read a lot more about it nowadays.
I'll keep on with mine for that kind of help validate you guys is, but the problem is with parents is they think it might be a teacher issue as well. And so then they go to homeschooling or they go to something else so I grew up in Iowa, grew up in Iowa, lived in Illinois. Both of those schools are district-based states, meaning like the district you're in is the schools you have to go to. Yeah. In Arizona, it's an open enroll state. So you can go to, if they're in Chino, they can go to school in Prescott or Prescott Valley. They can go to school anywhere they want. So parents will blame the teachers or the system, in a sense, the system, or blaming the teacher that this is happening. Will then take them to a Prescott school and they'll fail in the Prescott school too and move them to a Prescott Valley school. And within a year and a half, that kid's back in Chino Valley again, realizing like, hey, it took me take this kid to all these schools thinking it was a teacher's issue when it really was the student was falling through the system and the parent needs to invest in getting them more help too. So it's like, it's a double thing where the parents are bailing and going to something else thinking it's a teacher issue when it's not the teachers, the ratio's off. So it again just validates the idea that like catch it early, but tutoring and things of that nature, we have to get them back on pace. You just can't ignore it. Just can't catch it early and like, well, the teacher has to teach better. There's just no ability to teach better. We need more time with this kid.
Yeah, there's unfortunately, like most things, unless it's, observed by many, right? Most problems don't have a single point of failure. So this isn't just conducive to the education industry, but overall, people, they don't want to blame themselves. I think it's easier, it's cost effective and less taxing if you blame somebody else for something, because then you don't have to hold yourself accountable to it, right? Looking at the mirror and holding yourself accountable can be a difficult position, for anybody, especially for a parent. I don't have any kids, but I get enough. I have a large sample size where I can somewhat determine, not fully deterministic, but with that extremely high probability of what's going on, right? So I don't necessarily, and I think that's something that happens a lot in society is I mean, this could be a whole nother topic that we talk about, but I won't go in too deep with this. But I think when people have children, first of all, I think maturity is a choice. I fully believe that being mature is a choice, right? So just because you're 50 years old, it doesn't mean that you're going to be a mature human being,
Mhm.
right? You might not be a great role model for a younger person, right? But I think what happens a lot is when people have kids, they somewhat lose touch with themselves and live more vicariously through their children. So it's a lot harder to keep up maturity because they're living through their children, right? And children are mature. I mean, it's just what it is. You can have a really mature younger child, but if their brain isn't fully developed, I mean, they're not fully developed. They're immature. I don't mean that in like a sociological kind of a way. I mean that in a biological, somewhat physiological way as well. So I think a lot of parents regress their maturity, and when you're and I might be going on a limb here, but I'm okay with doing that. When you're less mature, you're going to hold yourself accountable. You're going to when you are less mature minded, you're going to not hold yourself accountable as much, because I think mature minded people have experience in the world. They've had challenges in the world. They've had, I don't want to use the word failures because I try to use the word challenges because we don't like to use the word failure a whole lot. But there are, a lot of challenges that more mature minded people have. And, life is a distribution curve. It goes up and down, up and down. And I think the easiest path is to stay as close to the baseline as you can. Right. And I think a lot of parents can't do that. I'm not, so on that note, the blame game, we actually did a podcast episode on that. So maybe there could be some like cross linking here,
For sure. Yeah.
for that episode when we put it out. There isn't a point of blame in the world. We live, unfortunately, but maybe fortunately, sometimes we live in a very gray world. It isn't black and white. It would be so much easier. There'd be so much less anxiety if it was black and white, but it's not. There's certain things that might be close to it, but usually societally at large, it's a very, very gray area. So it makes sense why people would want to blame others. It relieves them of responsibility, or relieves them of, well, maybe not responsibility so much, but it definitely relieves them of accountability. And when you're living vicariously through your child, I would say high 90% of our parents think their child is the smartest kid on the face of the earth. And that couldn't be any further from the truth. As we know, especially in the United States, I can't speak globally, but I'm sure it's very similar in a lot of countries. We live in a competitive environment. You go to preschool, it's competitive in its own right, right? You go to kindergarten, it has competition as well. You get into middle school, it's there, you start to get into organized, active, competitive things, right? Like sports, clubs, things like that. You get into high school, you're just moving through these ranks, right? You're going through these like layers of competition. You get into high school and it becomes extremely competitive because now you're becoming an adult, right? And you can push your body, you can push your mind a lot more. Then you go into college. A lot of people don't like to leave college because they're afraid to get out into the ultimate competitive world, right? So I think competition has definitely played a big role, or the lack thereof, or the idea of competition being a negative has played a role in the blame game as well. Because I think that a lot of parents, I'm just generally speaking here, okay? I'm not saying that this is an all, right? This isn't a majority minority kind of a thing. But what I see a lot, and I'm a very competitive person, so maybe I see it from my lens like this a little bit, differently. But like I said before, we have enough data to show that a large majority of our parents, not the ones who their kids are student athletes, but mostly the ones where their parents aren't into some kind of competitiveness or competitive nature. Because it's not a negative. Okay. I think that's kind of what I'm getting at. Competition is not a negative, right? I think it's become a net negative, or it feels like it's become a net negative, where in reality, it's a net positive, because we do live in a capitalist society, and competition pretty much runs what, overarching what capitalism is. And I don't see that changing extremely for a while, but what I do see changing is attitudes of parents who don't even accept that life is competitive, right? There's stuff called gentle parenting that I know we've heard, where it's very psychologically driven, almost even manipulative. I mean, I think that there's a fine line between influence and manipulation, and I think a lot of people get caught up, when they get somebody to do something. They at first it might be, unless they're like, active, one of those, that 2% who actively knows what they're doing, right? When it comes to influence, they might take that a little bit too far. But influencing a kid to be more competitive in a positive way, I think has lost its luster. So that, I don't think, exists in the majority of households. And we see that, there's outcomes from that. There's results from that. Kids aren't able to handle, even there's a lot of adults. This kind of goes back to the emotional dysregulation and meltdowns. You see it all over the internet where people are having meltdowns. There's all kinds of stuff going on out there in the world that shows that, competition might be looked at as something as a negative, right? And it trickles down from parents and what we might want to classify as mature people and down to the more immature minds. And it becomes less influential and it becomes more manipulative. And so then these kids go to school and they're behaving just as if, social media has, I don't want to blame social media fully either, because, parents have control over what their kids do. I think a lot of parents don't feel like that because they've lost that control, or they feel like they've maybe lost that power. But like I said before, kind of like tying this all back up to your comment about parents blaming the system or parents blaming the school. There really is just a few things to blame. You can blame the teachers, you can blame the students, you can blame the system, and you can blame the parents, right? But it all kind of works in concert. So if there isn't reinforcement going on at home, nor is there reinforcement for studies and behavior going on at school and even out there in the environment, and even, some kind of controls on what influence or manipulation is coming in from a screen, like all that stuff needs checks and balances before a parent can blame a teacher, or a teacher can, blame the student, right? It's a very complex, difficult system to keep operational, But we see the blame game a lot. It's very heavy within education.
One thing you were going there, I wanted to piggyback on that real quick, was because earlier you said that one of the things you do is, besides obviously just the learning of the tutoring part, is also helping them like organize their schedule and be able to
Life skills.
Yeah, because some of the stuff that you're just pointing out there has them distracted or unfocused, and you need to help like put certain parameters in place. Like, guys, to do this, we have to like put some organization into your time. So
yeah, we're not clinical, psychologists. Like we don't have any like clinics on our staff, on our team. But you don't have to, to be a behavioral or behavior interventionist or a behavioral therapist. You need to be a high school GED, and then you go and you take a course in order to do it. So you don't have to have like a full accreditation to kind of work with this SEL, is what they call it in school. So social emotional learning. I think there's been too much of a focus on SEL in school, unfortunately. And SEL is somewhat of a placating therapy. It's not really a therapy. It's just kind of like it's an attempt to manage emotions in school. And it is an attempt to increase merit, maybe. Maybe that's a general statement. It definitely has more components to it, but I think there's been, especially in public schools, there's been a huge focus on the social emotional learning aspect of it, tending to feelings. So going back to kind of what I was saying about, or what I was beginning to say about gentle parenting, it's a very like SEL kind of driven methodology at the home and at the school. So imagine if you're getting both of that at school and at home and in the environment. I mean, we live in a very sensitive environment, right? I mean, people should be sensitive to other people, but also people need to have some grit, like people need to be able to, like, I don't want to raise dependent children. I want to raise independent children because my father's an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. A lot of my friends that I'm around, or a lot of friends that I have, are entrepreneurs. And it's just it's a way of life, right? Like, entrepreneurship is not, it's a choice, of course, but it's, I don't know, putting a little bit of pressure on oneself to have a greater gain in the end seems a little bit more, I guess, fun. Maybe it's my ADHD, than having a steady life.
Well, it's something you actually said earlier on why you wanted to no longer run a SaaS company or marketing agency and move into something that has a mission, right? Mission entrepreneurs are naturally mission driven. And a lot of times when we build businesses that just bring in income, that's actually not much of a mission for us.
Right.
And so we are mission driven people. Not everybody's mission driven, but the reason that entrepreneurship is a life because you're on a mission to do something great and in the lane that you feel like this is where I think I can impact the world, or this is where my attention is, right? So I think a lot of that is like just your mission driven, and it's like and I would say for the most part, most entrepreneurs are more mission driven than they are financially driven.
Yeah.
When we talk about competition, the competition is about how much more money I make. Competition is how impactful can this be. Money comes along with the journey. And I do think the true entrepreneurs that are really building great things, this someone like Elon Musk kind of stuff, right? Is like, yes, the guy is worth more money than anybody else. However, all the things he's building have nothing to do with money. They have to do with mission driven things that bring in a ton of money because he's chasing after something so big. Money comes along with it. But the idea is he's on missions that nobody else is willing to tackle or have tried to tackle. And I think that's what we all are on. We're not doing what Elon Musk is doing, but we have our lanes where we're driven. Like, this is what, for me, it's like what God put me on earth to do. This is the thing I think that I've developed a skill set over a long enough period of time this is the lane I think I'm finally being put into.
Yeah. I mean, it's the purpose, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Mission, purpose, kind of very similar. I mean, whether you like Elon Musk or not, I don't disagree. I mean, I think he's done some pretty incredible things for humanity. I think one of the bigger, I guess, challenges, I would almost go on a line and say it's one of the bigger problems is money in politics, right? Because I think that over the years has really created a kind of a two-headed monster. And because of media, I'm not just going to blame social media, because I like to hold myself accountable to things because I feel like I can actually I can complete goals if I hold myself accountable, right? I mean, sometimes sometimes it takes me a while to get going, right? But that's that task initiation problem that I have. So like I have to find stimulation in order to like really get moving. But I understand, there's a lot of political views. I won't get into that obviously, but there's a lot of political views on Elon Musk. Whereas, kind of where you're coming from, I tend to agree a little bit more. Yeah, he might, be the world's first trillionaire, but I feel like he's creating incredible value for humanity. And in a society that we have, in a capital structure that we have in the United States, you get rewarded for that, and I would imagine he gives back. I don't know a whole lot about, I've read both biographies, like the Ashley Vance one and then the Walter Isaacson, I think, both on Elon Musk. But I don't remember them talking about like philanthropy. Maybe I just didn't pay attention to that part. But I'm sure he gives back in some ways, I mean, he does it through his products and services. But anyway, outside of Elon Musk and what he's doing, yeah, as an entrepreneur, I'm a very mission, purpose driven person. I really want smart. I want a smart America, and even if internationally speaking, if people are coming to America because I know they love it, I mean, we had an unbelievable migration many years ago that, I don't think those people are coming here because they hate America. I think they're coming here because they don't like where they're coming from and they want a better life for their families. I believe that's the majority of, migrants who come here. And so there's an assimilation problem in the world too. Well, maybe not the world, but there's an assimilation problem. I think just kind of generally speaking with migratory patterns, with like human migration, if we let in too many and we don't allow them enough time to assimilate, that can organize and can grow into something that might not look very American, right? But I think over time, if you're here, you're multi-generational American, you understand how wonderful of a country America is. And I'm not saying that other countries aren't wonderful. I've traveled but I've never lived. That's the thing, not saying that I wouldn't try it, but I love what America has built, and I want I want to help international students who are becoming American or Americans continue to be the most innovative country on the planet, going back to competition. Competition plays a huge role in probably more private markets than public. And I don't mean public in regard, I mean public funded, right? Private funded markets, I think, are naturally competitive. I mean, that's kind of the whole point. Public funded, your Milton Friedman had this, famous economist. He wrote this book called Freedom to Choose that I just finished. And there were like these four, I think he called them like spending archetypes or four spending categories. Like the first one is category one is you make your own money and spend your money on yourself. The second category is you make your own money and spend money on yourself and other people. The third category is you make somebody else's money and spend it on yourself. And then the fourth is you make somebody else makes money for you. I mean, it's the same as the third. Somebody else makes money for you and you spend it on yourself and other people. So it's a spectrum, right? And I think what's bifurcated down the middle of that is the public and private markets, right? So publicly funded or private and public, right? So being a private enterprise has its benefits in somewhat competitive capitalism, which is probably redundant, right? In saying that, because like capitalism is naturally competitive, but, or being reliant on public funding, right? Which doesn't have a lot of competition. It's actually somewhat frowned upon in non-governmental organizations, right? It's like a right side up pyramid versus an upside down pyramid, right? Like it can be, depends on how your organization is structured, right? But going back to that, competition and the purpose, I think there's a lot more freedom within the private framework than there is in the public, right? Because you have a lot more responsibility and you have to hold yourself accountable in the private. In the public, and like I said, I'm speaking very generally, right? Like this isn't always the case, but overall, if you're a dependent, I think there's less accountability, right? Because you're spending other people's money. So that drives a lot of my personal mission, my personal growth, my personal struggles is I choose to make my own, I choose to have my own destiny, right? I have the freedom to choose. And I believe that. And I think that, creating more, there was a quote, I don't remember who said it, but it was something like this, today's college students are tomorrow's government, right? It's something like that. But I think you get the point, right?
Yeah.
The education, how we educate the kids today is how they're going to govern when they get into power. And we're seeing that, we're seeing this stuff flips all the time. Things go back and forth all the time. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast, right? Nothing ever stays the same. We're seeing a lot of different ideologies, hit, I guess, the sociological market, right? Or the like political science, right? Like we're seeing a lot of, maybe not political science, but like that's a discipline within how the societal market moves from a socio-political economic or socio-political kind of perspective, right? So we're seeing shifts fundamentally at like a large level, right? Seeing a lot more kids, Gen Z specifically, they just have it in their minds whether they've been taught that or whether they're actually experiencing it. Because I remember I'm a millennial cusper. I'm a millennial Gen X cusper. So I'm right on the cusp. So I can dip my toe into the millennial world and I can dip my toe into the Gen X world. I remember life being pretty difficult, looking for a job, going to school, going to college, looking for a job, Job didn't work. Got to get another job. It was who you know, not what you knew at that time. And then we moved into this transactional world with millennials and Gen X or Gen Z and now Gen Alpha, where it's been very transactional. Now I think we're moving back into a relational, world where it's because the systems just eat everything, right? So you put in an application for a job into an applicant tracking system, an ATS, and it's just going to get gobbled up. It's not going to actually touch a human's hand. It might go across the screen of a human, but I think we're re-entering a world where it's who you know, not what you know, and the relationships are becoming much more important and prominent. But you hear Gen Z talking about how difficult it is in today's world to affordability, right? That's always a hot topic for politics. It's a great topic, right? Like a lot of fear comes from affordability. And I'm not saying things aren't affordable. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that at all. But I look back to, you have to account for many things. You have to account for the globalization of things. You have to account for inflation. You have to account for many. I believe economics drives pretty much everything, right? It drives pretty much every decision that we make, whether we think it or not, right? Like even displaced people who live on the streets are thinking about money, right? They're thinking about how to get things, right? Like it's hard to get things if you don't have some sort of an economical, outlook on things or an economical drive, to understand economics or a psychological drive to understand economics, right? But the Gen Z, which is a lot of kids that we do work with, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they would prefer, and I think this goes back to the competitive nature. It seems like they have a higher propensity to discuss how difficult life is for them from an affordability standpoint, rather than understanding that life is competition, right? That they have to actually really compete. And so moving into this kind of more relationship based world, that's something that at Swoon we really try to help them with, because a lot of our academic coaches are very relatable to them. So we're trying to bring this more relationship back to a transactional world, or a world that's been transactional for 10, 15 years, right? Maybe even more than that, right? Maybe even since .com. That's really where transactional started to happen, right? E-commerce on the internet. I think that's where we lost the ability to relate and buy and sell things, compete with one another from a personal level, because you can tap your phone and get pretty much whatever you want. You can go on Amazon and there isn't a product that doesn't exist. You can download an app and it can do pretty much anything and everything that you want to know, or anything and everything you could possibly want to do. Also, with Google, there's everything that you would want to know, right? And you can get your answers like that. Very transactional. Now with AI, the transaction has accelerated exponentially because of AI. Now you can build an app, to do whatever you want. We've completely lost touch with humanity. Completely lost touch with that. A lot of the schools right now as well, they're starting to ban phones. They're starting to ban screens in school. I think that's a great thing, to be quite honest. Our mission at Swoon with our products, because we could talk about legacy as well, in a little bit if you want to go into that. But really our mission is to keep the human at the center, because we know that kids aren't intrinsic learners. They're just not. Being an intrinsic learner is not only intrinsically validating, but it's intrinsically motivating. Like you have to be able to motivate yourself to want to gain new knowledge and learn things. I'm lucky because I have ADHD. I can't help it. My sensory organs are like satellites. They're like, satellite receivers. Like my ears, I pick up everything. And I try not to. I can't block out. I make signals from the noise, whereas most people just hear the noise, right? And so I get locked onto something and I get into a flow state and I want to know deeply about it, right? But I try not to waver into other categories, because I know that will overstimulate me and it'll make me melt down. So I try to really focus on one thing at a time, which kind of brings me back to the Kanban. But Swoon, because we're kind of tying this all back together, because we're a private entity, our goal is to make kids independent, right? I think a lot of public entities have a collectivist mentality, which isn't a bad thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's kind of like Jeff Bezos and his two pizza team, right? Have you ever heard of that? Okay, so Jeff Bezos said, he was dealing with so many people, right? He said, a team of workers should only be able to consume 2 pizzas. Anything bigger than that needs to be broken, right? This is not like the concept of chunking or Kanban or, agile or breaking things down into smaller components and then building them back up to the greater whole. It's not new. This is something that, it's biological, right? But in schools, it's not. You don't see this in schools. And that's another thing that we're really trying to break through and solve, because it works for me. It works for Carla. It works for every software engineer. I mean, we use Asana right now for our software engineering, but we're moving over into front office because we're ready to build front office using front office as a tracking tool. And that's kind of goes back to the eating your own dog food, right? That's what software calls using your own product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I want the product to be amazing. And that goes back to the mission. It's not driven by, I am not driven by, money is not the extrinsic motivator for me. Having an amazing product that gives value to people at a fairly decent cost, right? I mean, obviously we need operating income, right? But that's the mission. That's what drives, me and Swoon Learning. And fortunately, my business partner shares the same vision. So in order to do that, you have to use your own product. So if you're not using your own product, then the devs aren't learning how difficult, things might be if there's bugs that arise. Product managers or product owners, like such as myself and the ones that we have working for Swoon, they're not able to feel the pain when things go awry. So we're not able to feel the end user's pain, right? If you're not using your own software, if you're not eating your own dog food. And I've always been a huge proponent of that, especially for the companies that I've worked at when I've had jobs. Like I loved learning, so I worked at Pearson, and I got paid to make books and read books. It was incredible. I hated cooking, so I found a tool called a precision cooker. It's a sous vide device that there was a startup that I worked for, and that was the one that got sold. And so I learned how to be a better cook, right? But that wasn't just for me. That was also for the relationships in my life too, because, food brings people together. If you can give people good food, at least good food, I mean, could be great, but if you give them good food, they're going to like you more, because you're feeding them. It's nurturing, right? It's nourishing, I should say. So, that kind of mission of eating our own dog food and using our own tool and pushing all of the builders of this tool to use it themselves and feel the pain themselves is going to make the product exponentially better. And that's really what drives. I'm a very product driven person. I don't like gadgets so much, but I like networks. I like things that can build upon itself, right? I think Bill Gates said a network is something that I'm going to probably absolutely demolish this, but he said something like a network, it becomes, so it's a platform and then it becomes a network. No, sorry. He said something along the lines of like people always use the term my platform, right? And I try not to conflate that with a portal, right? Like a portal is like a window into something, right? A platform, he said, is when the network becomes more valuable than its users or something like that. Really the idea behind it was the users make it a platform, right? The users make it valuable. And so that's really the goal of delight in building software or building any product for that matter. You could easily build any kind of product that you have right now and have it fulfilled by Amazon and sell it on Amazon, or you could sell it direct to your website. You can go D2C, right? And then you could drive it to zero and you could probably become a multimillionaire, right? Or a multi-billionaire if you want. And you could wipe your hands clean of any customer service. I've seen that happen all the time. I've seen that happen so much. But talking about legacy, that doesn't build any kind of a legacy, right? Given that I don't have children that are of my biological own. I mean, I have a lot of kids that we service. For me to build a legacy, it's through the tools that I create. That's my child, right? Front office is my child. And I want, like any parent, I want everybody to love my child, right? I know that's not the reality of things, but front office is, it's definitely my legacy. It's why I get up every morning and put myself through some of the entrepreneurial pains. It's why I have, the anxiety that I do around making it or breaking it. It's why I decide to not go on vacations, multiple times a year. It's why I decide to, eat noodles and rice and nothing else sometimes. Entrepreneurship's a way of life, but that legacy of having a network effect or having a network is, that's really what drives me.
So, you were going on so much good stuff. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I think the last thing we'll kind of finish with is, so through all the stuff you went through is you did talk in the beginning about two verticals, right?
Yeah.
One vertical would be front office, right? So that's really the stuff that's going into schools that are creating the stuff to really find for schools the obstacles that could be coming for the kids, right? Going from, hey, we're using data to give you feedback that we're about to hit a drop off point, and other things that you're building in the front office over time. But that's kind of the part that I kind of took from it. And then that has ability to feed into the other vertical, which would be like the tutoring style coaching business, right? So those are the main two. So people that are like, okay, Swoon Learning, this is what this is. This is these two verticals. Who would you want them to connect you to? So like if somebody's watched this, like, this sounds really cool. Why doesn't our school have it? Like, or you want to be connected with superintendents, principals? Who's the people that you're looking to be connected to that somebody like watch this video? Because for the most part, or could somebody, the front office needs to be connected with one of those kind of combinations. Could somebody just join Swoon Learning and just get tutoring from you guys? What can people do that while watching this video? How can they access your stuff?
So we don't have like a freemium version right now. It's all pretty much closed beta. Well, beta in the institutions. Gold Master Alpha is in the tutoring vertical. So front office is the connector, right? So front office services both the academic coach, the tutoring side of things, and connects students and parents and coaches on Swoon front office. And then we have the branded kind of white label school front office, which we generally say. So, you could be, Horizon High School, HHS dot front office dot swoonlearning.com, right? So that's more like the white label. And then, but these two talk, right? They both integrate into each other. So they need extended help. They can find it within Swoon front office, right? The tutoring vertical. So as far as on the tutoring side, we're always recruiting for new academic coaches. We pay really well. So we want a certain level of a coach, right? They've got to have pretty high achieving credentials.
Where are you getting those coaches? Are they like college students? Are they teachers? Like where are these guys?
A lot of college students, a lot of juniors and seniors in prestigious schools like UC, University of California, CSU, California State University. We've got coaches from Harvard, a lot of recent graduates as well, because they're looking for work. So I'll finish answering a question here, but I won't go back into like deep detail about the Gen Z. But, I think there's like 150,000 jobs that were cut in high tech this year or something like that. It's something ridiculously high. And so, a lot of them are not college graduates, but imagine that their college graduates are competing against those who have just had tenure and got let go. So there's a lot of experience that they have. So the competition is fierce, right? Especially with this AI revolution that's happening, especially in high tech, white collar jobs are, really, really challenging and super competitive right now. So we want to create jobs by allowing, you need education, right? Education is a pillar. Without education, you don't have society. Without society, then what is there, right? What's life? So these kids are coming right out of college and they're not able to get jobs. So why not contract or employ them to continue using what's fresh in their mind to strengthen and reinforce their skills, which really allows them to be more competitive in the market, right? In the job market, if they choose to go into the job market like that, right? But you even need that. You need that in any job, right? Like having education discipline will give you a major advantage in any job, whether it's white collar, blue collar, green collar, whatever you want to call it, right? You definitely, like, education is, I mean, it's ubiquitous. You need it. So we're always looking for third, fourth year college students at prestigious schools or have really great degrees. On our website, on our careers page, we have a criteria of what we're looking for jobs. So we're looking for them as far as, hiring. And then, we do have because we pay well and we attract high functioning, high discipline, highly accredited academic coaches. We're probably on the upper end of what a parent would want to pay, but more affluent. I would say somewhere in the range of 150 plus household income. I mean, we have a lot of customers, parents, guardians who are doctors, lawyers, electrical engineer, like product people. So like very affluent jobs, right? Very high paying jobs, where they care deeply about their child's education and they understand that life is competitive. So we don't really do a lot of low income. My brother has a coach company, an entertainer coach company. And I remember I asked him one time, I said, and then I'll get to the institutional side. I said to him, what kind of clients do you take? I mean, I know who his clients are, but I was like what, like, if you could put it plainly to me on how your operation, your leasing operation works, like how would you explain it? And he said, we get bands on the way up and we get bands on the way down. That's pretty much his sweet spot, right? So like he's not dealing with the bands who are on the top or entertainers who are on the top because they can afford to buy their own entertainer coach. And they're not dealing with the entertainers who can't even afford to leave their town to go play another show, right? So he's got a segment, within his customer range. So we're definitely on the way up, and not necessarily on the way down. We're pretty much, we get very affluent people. They care deeply about their kids.
And those parents can find you through like learning online or something, or are they
Yeah.
coming from schools that are recommending? How are those parents finding you guys? Like how are you marketing to them? So these parents like, hey, my kid, we're in this category, right? It's good. Like we're doctors stuff. My kid needs it. Can they just go on to swoonlearning.com or something and be able to like get tutoring?
Yeah. They can go on to swoonlearning.com and they would just go, they would get started. There's a call to action, book your free session there. So we offer free hour-long sessions to evaluate where a child is in their learning journey, and just to get some basic information about the kid and their school and their parents and social life and whatnot. And then we offer free 30 or 60-minute one free academic coaching session. So a parent and a child collectively can decide whether they want to do an hour long with a specific coach. So we'll match them, with a coach. And so they can decide if they want to do an hour long session with one coach, or they want to do two 30-minute sessions with two different coaches, so that they can, trial two different coaches or multiple coaches.
Okay, so that right there is we call the Swoon almost tutoring coaching avenue. And then let's go down to the institutional one. What's that look like?
So the institutional one, we have some beta programs right now that we're working on with some schools. One in San Jose. The applications, it's slightly different with the tutoring. version of front office, Swoon front office. This one doesn't necessarily track grades and attendance because you don't really need to do
That's
that.
all right.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, it's covered. Yeah, and it's one-on-one, right? So like you're either there or you're not, right? And it's mostly and it's very high dosage, high focus academic coaching, right? Do we want to pause, or do you think it'll
Oh,
pick
they
better?
won't hear that.
Okay. And so, but on the institutional side, there's many more tools involved, within the school front office, right? There's the attendance, there's the grade book, there's the ability for Swoon Assist. What we call it, Swoon Assist is our AI. So there's a Swoon Assist dashboard that provides a much deeper level of reporting for their analysis, right? For the teacher's analysis. And that was that natural language analysis, the natural language feedback that Swoon Assist does. So it doesn't just give you like a bunch of reports, right, that you have to kind of dig through. It's not like Google Analytics where you have to be a rocket scientist, to really understand all the dashboards in there. But it's more, it's a don't make me think kind of way of surfacing information. And that's a Steve Krug. I don't know if you've ever read any Steve Krug. He wrote a book called Don't Make Me Think and Rocket Surgery Made Easy. So it's all about usability. He's a usability guy. And so it's like a don't make me think kind of reporting, right? Like it's a very chat based reporting. And so they have access to a lot of those tools that the tutoring side doesn't have access to.
Cool.
So day-to-day operation.
So on that side of things, who are you wanting to be connected? Because obviously on the side we know tutoring, that category is going to be somebody that's higher end income family. What's the institutional? If somebody's like, hey, I hear this, I wish our school had this. Like, who would I be able to connect with Swoon to make sure this, we could get this our school?
Sure, superintendents, head of schools, deans.
And you're probably looking towards more private schools. My guess is public would really make as much sense. So.
Yeah, procurement departments, even IT, because there's IT integration, like configuration that we have to do. They have their certain requirements, so it's got to pass through that as well. But yeah, mostly private institutions. I'd say like head of schools. I don't know if there's principals in private. I'm not sure if there's like the principal title in private. I think they're like head of school.
Enough about the different school systems. Eric has always been in public. That's all I really know.
Yeah,
so.
And that has its hierarchical, org units or whatnot, or no hierarchical titles, right? So it's a little bit different in private schools. So like charter schools, because like I believe charter is like some private, some public funding, right? They do raise, and homeschool for sure, homeschoolers, international students, because we are very human at the center, human focused. We have a plethora of different ethnicities, and we have a plethora of different language speakers within our academic coaching. We have about 100 contractors that work with us, and they speak all different types of languages. Very, very diverse. We're a very diverse group of coaches. So plugging into a homeschool, like we have also on the other side, or on the institutional side, there's the ability to lesson plan. So you can build out a lesson plan and plug that right in, and there's a plan board, and we should probably do like a demo at one point, like maybe like another podcast where we can do like a demo or something like that. But basically the way that it works is, because we haven't really talked about this portion, so maybe you can like cut this in somewhere. So the institutional side has a certain set of features. One of them is called a plan board. On the tutoring side, front office, it has this as well, but it's not utilized as much, right? It's more, it's less curriculum driven, right? It's more the plan, the session plan. It's more like a session plan rather than a curriculum, plan, or based off of like a syllabus.
Yeah.
It's not pedagogical. Is that how you say it? How do you say that? Hey Siri, define pedagogical. All right, so we can put that in there. So the tutoring side is less pedagogical, right? Whereas the institutional side is very, it's very rote, like this is how it has to be. So we developed this plan board that the teacher puts all of their lesson plans in there for the semester. And then unlike a typical Kanban board where it's more shared and open, it gives the teacher control to be able to mirror. We call it mirroring. They are able to mirror a lesson or a test or any kind of an assignment to a specific group of students, right? So like to their class. So like a group equals a class. And on that student's end, they have a work board. They don't have a plan board. So they're only doing work. So whatever's mirrored that the teacher assigns, it's like a teacher handing out homework in a class, right? You only hand it out to the kids who are in your class. You're not going to hand it out to everybody else, right? You're not going to invite more people into your class. It's specific to those students. So they mirror it to those students as work boards, and the students all upload their homework. They're not working on the computer. They're doing handwritten homework, taking a picture of it, and then uploading it to front office. Front office, in the future, we're going to have Swoon Assist is going to help with homework grading. It's going to help grade the homework and basically give the teacher a checksum against how they would grade it, right? It's not going to tell them exactly, hey, here's what we think the homework is. It's going to walk through them, with it, so that they're not just relying, because we don't want the teachers relying on AI as well. We don't access our AI. We don't expose our AI to the students. It's all agentic in the background. Some customer support, they can use Swoon Assist within, but it's within our closed garden. We don't allow our AI to access externally, like the internet, like a lot of these tools. OpenAI, right, or Perplexity or Claude or whatever. So it's very closed. It's tools for teachers, right? Like the system that we built are tools for teachers. So any school that is looking to hold their kids more accountable to turning in their homework, they would want to subscribe or rent, front office, right? They'd want to purchase a license to front office.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
I just kind of wanted like somebody to have like actionable steps at the end. Here's what we're looking at there. Those connecting points are great too. Where can they, so what do you guys have for like resources in terms of like website, Instagram, like where can they learn more about you guys?
Swoonlearning.com is the best place to learn. There's not a ton of information on front office up there. But if, they can go to our contact page and reach out to us if they want to learn more about front office or get a demo. There's a drop down there that says, request demo. We're on Instagram, Swoon Learning. We're on, everything's handle is Swoon Learning. So we're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. Facebook's probably our number one go-to site. We've got community on there as well that we interact with. So if any of your audience is on Facebook communities, we can jump into those communities. We just need to know which ones they are, and we can offer some assistance. And we have we're on Nextdoor, we're on YouTube, Threads, TikTok, and Yelp. We've got a 5.0 rating on Yelp. I think like around. Yelp's kind of finicky about letting reviews come through, which is really strange. But we've got about 15 reviews on there right now. So,
do you guys do Google reviews at all?
We don't have any. Okay. We're on Google My Business, but we don't.
My business advice to always try to get Google reviews. Okay. But the thing is, iPhones use Yelp, Google, all Androids use Google. And that's why it's like, why are they both important? But Yelp has like these blockers to them. Google has a lot more open system, which is more. Yelp's rules are they have to have reviewed enough different companies.
Right.
You being their first review doesn't usually make it.
Yeah, it's in the not recommended.
Which is so stupid.
Yeah, I don't like it.
It has nothing to do with, like, that's not how review systems should work. But regardless. So you went into your legacy for sure, but let's just go ahead and leave this with something like, what's the biggest, like, we know what the business is. We know why you built the business. Like, what is like what's the future? What's the next 2 to 4 year kind of like thing? Where are you going with Swoon?
We'd really like to become, like I said, the accountability tool for schools. The one-on-one tutoring is, it's tough to scale one-on-one tutoring. We do offer a program called Skills Accelerator, which helps with learning loss over the summer. We incorporate strategy games at the end of sessions, of course, to use the skills that they build up over the summer. I mean, that's in language arts and math, and we haven't done any science yet, but we're continually building out those summer programs. We mainly have the Skills Accelerator at the school that we're working with in San Jose on location. We had it, but we're definitely can do it online. in larger groups. So summer programs is something that we see being a component for a virtual learning in the future. But ultimately, we want front office to be the homework tracker and the accountability tool for private schools for the most part. And we really want to get into more institutions nationally, but more specifically internationally, because that, the globalization, you can't slow it down, especially with population growth. You can't slow down people wanting to come to the United States. You can limit it, but people are going to continue to come to the United States, and we want to continue to educate them. So if we can get them before they even come to the United States, then, well, if we can help them, I don't want to say get them, but if we can help them with how the American culture is and how we teach and we educate by way of American culture before they just land in the country and are unaware of how things work here, I think that would be a huge benefit to anybody trying to migrate, or to immigrate, to migrate, to the United States. So we're really trying to put a huge focus on international students as well, and try and be a part of international schools tool set, right? Be a part of their toolbox where we can, because I hear that a lot. I have a lot of international friends, and I hear a lot of them saying things like understanding the American culture prior to arriving here is a big benefit. And it makes sense, right? Like logically, right? Like if you go to Europe, say you go to Italy, like wouldn't you want to be educated on Italy a little bit before you went there, right? Just something, like maybe some history, maybe like what their industries are like, maybe where to go, where not to go. And what if you could have Swoon Learning help you with that, right? So we kind of want to be this conduit for general education at some point. I mean, that's probably like the big, hairy, audacious goal is really what we say is like no admin, right? No administration. So like if you need education, you can plug into with a human being rather than like watch a video, and you don't need to deal with like the administration piece of it. You can just get right to learning.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I love where you're going with this, Cory.
Thank you.
Guys, thanks for checking out this episode of Brotherhood Beyond Business podcast. All Cory's information will be down in the show links below. We have a podcast on our website as well. We'll catch you guys next time.
Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay locked in. Brotherhood is more than business. It's about leading from the front, leveling up in every domain, and becoming the CEO of your own life. Step up, execute, and we'll see you in the next one.